Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day. And today, Rotted Souls out there, I'd like you to join me on a journey. Not only am I tackling the advent calendar of Christmas horror movies, counting down 25 movies all the way to Christmas with slasher Santas and killer reindeer, but I also figure I may as well get a franchise out of the way while I'm at it. And sure enough, there is a 5-movie franchise that meets this criteria. So join me, won't you, on this first installment of Silent Night, Deadly Night. This one was made in 1984, and when it first came out, it was one of the most protested movies out there. This was back in a time horror movies and horror movie lovers were not as socially accepted as they are today. They were often seen as misanthropes and misfits and outcasts. If you liked horror movies, then you were squarely in the same category as preverts that like the pornographies. So this movie came out and it featured a killer Santa and had the box art that was fairly iconic, and people protested. It actually got removed from theaters for a short while. This came out at the same time as the original Nightmare on Elm Street. However, this was done mass production, mass release by TriStar Pictures, which was, already tried and true. And Nightmare on Elm Street was done by this new fledgling production company distributor, New Line Cinema, and was in many fewer theaters. So this definitely took some of the heat off of Nightmare and allowed it to, not that it was solely the reason that it succeeded. It was a classic in its own right, but this definitely took some of the heat off and allowed it to start building momentum where it might have otherwise gotten squashed for being the violent horror movie that it is. There were a number of people that protested against this one, actors that spoke out, wrote letters to the Hollywood Reporter, so on and so forth. But ultimately, what we wound up with, in my opinion, truth be told, I had never seen one of the Silent Night, Deadly Night movies prior to tackling this franchise for this advent calendar here. But having watched this one now, I can say that my opinion of it is this was a very interesting movie for me until it started getting slashery. And to get into more details of that, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And this story starts with a boy named Billy. Billy is traveling with his family to visit his grandfather, who is in a mental institution for basic nonverbal, just zoning out, just completely non-communicative in any way. And sure enough, when he's left alone with him while the parents go and fill out paperwork, his grandfather becomes verbal, pulling him aside and asking him if he's been good this year, and if he hasn't, Santa punishes those that have been naughty. All right. So the kid is good and scared and wet in his pants for the most part, not literally, but metaphorically. And then the grandfather goes back to nonverbal. It's very much a frog on the stage of a Warner Brothers cartoon. But the point is hammered home to him that Santa punishes naughty boys and rewards nice boys. So on the way home, they encounter Santa Claus. Huzzah! Only this Santa Claus is actually a gas station robber whose car has broken down, and then begins an act of malicious terror against the family, basically killing his mother and father in front of his young little eyeballs. The only surviving member of his family is his younger brother, who's just a baby at the time, doesn't remember anything, but this is imprinted on him, and he is sent with his brother to an orphanage, and the orphanage is run by nuns, and Mother Superior is of the opinion that whatever he saw at that moment with the killer Santa, that he was too young to have it really imprinted upon him, and that proves to be incorrect when he starts acting out around Christmas time. So the infinite wisdom of the Mother Superior decides that the best way to tackle this is to punish him further and reinforce the idea that punishment is good, punishment is necessary. And from there, he becomes an adult and is forced into a situation with his job to play Santa Claus. And then he gets to witness some naughty things, and the Santa punishes naughty people, starts taking over, and a switch flips in his brain, and the movie turns into the slasher that we expected from there. That wasn't until about halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through the movie, that switch flipped. And for me, I gave the plot a 17 out of 25, strictly mostly because of the beginning portion of that. I thought it was very interesting to watch this downward mental spiral of Billy and the tragedy that unfolded. I mean, even though it wasn't the slashery part of the movie, I thought it was the most brutal. I thought it was the most difficult to watch for me. To watch this poor kid, just wide-eyed in fear as Santa is just slashing up his parents, and then sent to the orphanage where he's getting no sympathy whatsoever. And, any attempts that he has at communicating what he is feeling is met with punishment. And it was just really brutally interesting for me. And then the switch flipped, and it became a slasher, and it became a bit nonsensical. And, it's not that it was a bad movie at that point. It just wasn't the portion of it that interested me. But regardless, I thought it was decently well done. I was surprised by this movie. I really actually liked it. I was not expecting to. I really genuinely wasn't, but here we are. The Intent, I gave a 21 out of 25. This was shocking. This was gory. This was interesting. And this had good character development. I honestly think so. The character of Billy, as the years progressed, I thought was good. The people surrounding him was good. The character of Mother Superior was just, you loved her, but you hated her at the same time. I thought everything that it was intending to be, it was, and I loved it for that. It was definitely more than what I would have expected from what seemingly was a one-note slasher from the 80s. The acting, I gave a 16 out of 25. Not too bad. I would say on the plus side of average. I was actually particularly impressed with Lillian Chauvin as the Mother Superior and Danny Wagner as 8-year-old Billy, the middle age there. When he was in the orphanage, I was pretty impressed by the performance of Danny there as Billy. I honestly think that the children portrayal of Billy was better than the adult, played by Robert Brian Wilson. That, for me, was just, even before the switch flipped, when he was working and had to become Santa and so forth, before he started seeing the naughty things and became a slasher, for me, it was just a bit hammy and a bit 80s. But altogether, I was actually pretty impressed with some of the performances in this one, to the point where, 16 out of 25 on the acting there. The technical, I gave it 12 out of 25. Kills, they just weren't that impressive in terms of tone or effects. This really had the hallmark of a major distributor that wanted a slasher scary movie but weren't willing to challenge the MPAA or the censors enough to actually make it through with any level of real brutality. It just kept cutting before anything really interesting, too awful happened. So there wasn't a whole lot for me to really judge there, and the camera work and so forth was fairly adept. It was just a fairly generic 80s movie at that point, nothing too special. But that's just on a technical level. That gives us a total score of 66 out of 100 points. This was 10 times better than I thought it would be, based on the poster art, based on the history, based on being an 80s slasher that has not really taken off in the world of horror. Yes, it has 5 movies to it, but most of those were really pretty underground VHS runs, and I'm hoping that they're all right. We shall see. But that's it for Silent Night, Deadly Night. I do recommend it. I think this one is worth watching. This is a good entry into the advent calendar of horror. Watch list. If you want to watch a Christmas horror movie and you want to watch a slasher Santa, I think that you could do a lot worse than Silent Night, Deadly Night 1984. Thank you very much for watching and tuning in here. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.